Welcome to tonight's bedtime story. You're safe, you're cozy, and it's time to rest. So settle in, close your eyes, and let the story guide you gently into sleep. Tonight, we're embarking on a peaceful journey through the sleepy history of London, with a special focus on the mysteries and secrets that lie beneath the iconic Trafalgar Square. Imagine the bustling heart of the city above, with its grand monuments and lively crowds. But just below the surface, layers of time whisper tales of ancient rivers, hidden tunnels, and long-lost lives. We'll explore it all in a calm, flowing narrative, letting the words carry you like a gentle breeze through the streets of old London. So settle in, close your eyes if you like, and let's begin. London, that ancient and ever-evolving city, has always been a place where history slumbers just out of sight, waiting for the curious to awaken it. Trafalgar Square, right in the center of it all, seems like a modern hub of tourism and celebration today, but its roots stretch back centuries, through layers of soil, stone, and secrets. Long before the square was even dreamed of, this spot was part of Charing Cross, a name that echoes from the 13th century. Back then, it was a simple crossroads, marked by a stone cross erected by King Edward III in memory of his beloved wife, Eleanor of Castile. When she passed away in 1290, Edward had 12 elaborate crosses built along the route her funeral procession took from Lincoln to Westminster Abbey, and the one at Charing stood as the final marker before her resting place. That original cross is gone now, destroyed during the English Civil War in the 1640s by Puritan iconoclasts who saw it as too idolatrous. But a replica stands nearby in the forecourt of Charing Cross Station. From this point, all distances in Britain were once measured, making it the true heart of the empire. As you picture this, imagine horse-drawn carts rumbling over muddy paths, merchants haggling, and the distant chime of church bells from St. Martin in the Fields, which has watched over the area since the 1220s, though the current building dates to the 1720s. As the centuries rolled on, the area around what would become Trafalgar Square transformed. In the 14th century, it became home to the King's Mews, a royal stable where the monarch's hawks were kept for falconry, a sleepy pursuit in itself, with birds perched quietly in the dim light, waiting for the hunt. After a fire in 1534, the mews were rebuilt as grand stables for horses, serving kings and queens through the Tudor and Stuart eras. Think of the soft nickering of horses, the scent of hay and leather, and grooms moving quietly in the early morning mist. This royal enclave lasted until the early 19th century, when King George IV decided to relocate the stables to Buckingham Palace, opening up the land for something grander. It was a time of great change in London, with the Regency era bringing visions of elegant architecture and public spaces. Architect John Nash, famous for his sweeping designs, was tasked in 1826 with clearing the site and creating a new square. Nash imagined a cultural hub, with the National Gallery rising on the northern side, its columns gleaming in the sunlight. But Nash passed away in 1835 before seeing his full vision realized, and it fell to Sir Charles Barry, the man behind the Houses of Parliament, to complete the work. Construction began in earnest in 1840, with workers excavating the sloping ground to create a level terrace using sturdy Aberdeen granite for the balustrades and steps. The square opened to the public on May 1st, 1844, but it wasn't named Trafalgar Square until around 1835, in honor of the Battle of Trafalgar in 1805, where Admiral Horatio Nelson led the British fleet to a decisive victory over the combined French and Spanish navies during the Napoleonic Wars. Nelson, that heroic figure with his one arm and one eye lost in earlier battles, became a symbol of British resilience. Though he died on the deck of his ship, HMS Victory, his legacy was immortalized here. The square's design was meant to inspire awe, a vast open space where people could gather, reflect, and celebrate. In those early days, it was surfaced with tar macadam, a smooth innovation for the time, though it was later replaced with stone in the 1920s for durability. As you envision this transformation, picture the workers toiling under the London sky, hammers echoing as they shaped the square that would become a stage for history. At the heart of the square stands Nelson's Column, a towering tribute that dominates the skyline. Planned separately from the square's development, a competition in 1838 led to William Railton's design, a Corinthian column inspired by ancient Rome, originally intended to be 218 feet tall, but scaled back to 145 feet 3 inches from base to hat. Construction started in 1840, and by November 1843, the statue of Nelson himself, sculpted by Edward Hodges Bailey from Craigleith sandstone, was hoisted into place using a makeshift railway and capstan. The column's base features 4 massive bronze relief panels, each depicting key moments from Nelson's battles: the Battle of Cape St. Vincent, the Battle of the Nile, the Battle of Copenhagen, and his death at Trafalgar. These were cast from captured French cannons, a poetic touch of victory. But the column wasn't complete without its guardians, the 4 bronze lions at the base, added in 1867. Sculpted by Edwin Landseer, a painter more familiar with domestic animals, the lions have an oddly cat-like appearance, their paws resembling those of house cats rather than fierce predators. Legend has it that Landseer used a dead lion from the London Zoo as a model, but delays meant the corpse began to decompose, leading to those peculiar paws. As night falls over the square in your mind, imagine those lions watching silently, their bronze forms cool and unchanging amid the passing crowds. Flanking the column are the fountains added in 1841 to soften the square's stark lines and reduce the heat from the stone surfaces. Originally powered by steam engines, pumping water from two artesian wells, one beneath the square and another behind the National Gallery. These fountains bubbled with soft, pure water drawn from deep underground reservoirs. The wells tapped into ancient rainwater from the Holmesdale Valley, some 10 miles away, at depths over 250 feet. A remarkable 880-foot tunnel, 6 feet wide, connected the shafts, holding up to 7,000 gallons and capable of supplying 300 gallons per minute. This engineering marvel, built around 1845, predated London's first tube tunnels by decades, a quiet testament to Victorian ingenuity. The water was so pure, it supplied not just the fountains, but government buildings and clubs like the Reform Club. In the 1930s, the fountains were redesigned by Sir Edwin Lutyens as memorials to Admirals Jellicoe and Beatty, with mermaids, dolphins, and tritons spouting water in graceful arcs. The original centerpieces were gifted to Canada, where they now grace Ottawa and Regina. Today, LED lights illuminate the fountains at night, creating a mesmerizing glow. But beneath it all lies that hidden tunnel, forgotten by most, carrying echoes of the past. Round the square, statues stand like silent sentinels, each with their own sleepy story. In the center of the southern traffic island is the equestrian statue of King Charles III, cast in 1633 by Hubert Le Sueur. It's the oldest statue in the square and marks the official center of London, from which all road distances are measured. During the Civil War, it was hidden by a parliamentarian brazier to avoid destruction, only to be rediscovered and reinstated after the restoration in 1675. On the plinths, you'll find George on horseback, added in 1843 despite public grumbling over costs. Major General Sir Henry Havelock, commemorating his role in the Indian Rebellion of 1857, and General Sir Charles James Napier, conqueror of Sindh in 1843. The fourth plinth, in the northwest corner, was meant for William IV, but funding fell short, leaving it empty for over 150 years. Since 1999, it has hosted temporary artworks, from a giant blue cockerel to a thumb-up sculpture, adding a modern whimsy to the historic space. Busts of admirals like Jellicoe, Beatty, and Cunningham line the North Terrace, while nearby stand statues of James II and even George Washington, a gift from Virginia in 1921, placed on soil imported from America, so the founding father never sets foot on British ground. But Trafalgar Square isn't just about what's above ground. Its true sleepy secrets lie beneath, in the layers of earth and engineering that support this bustling landmark. Digging during the square's construction in the 1840s revealed ancient river terraces, but it was in the late 1950s that workers uncovered fossils from 13,000 to 115,000 years ago. Bones of cave lions, rhinoceroses, straight-tusked elephants, hippopotamuses, and even cave hyena droppings. These remnants paint a picture of a prehistoric London, a lush valley where massive beasts roamed along the Thames long before humans built their cities. Deeper still are the underground railways that pulse like hidden veins. Charing Cross Station, with entrances right in the square, serves the Northern and Bakerloo lines. The Bakerloo branch was once called Trafalgar Square Station until 1979, when it merged during Jubilee Line construction. Though the Jubilee Line now bypasses Charing Cross, heading to Westminster instead, the disused platforms remain. Ghostly echoes of 1970s design with rounded tiles and abandoned escalators. These hidden spaces are part of London's vast underground network, and tours through hidden London reveal even more. Imagine walking through secret tunnels under Trafalgar Square, standing beneath the fourth plinth, or peering down ventilation shafts at passing Northern Line trains. These areas, closed to the public since 1999, have become film sets for movies like Skyfall, where James Bond chases villains through shadowy corridors. Paddington, with its whimsical bear adventures, and Thor, the Dark World, transforming the platforms into otherworldly realms. The tunnels tell stories of engineering triumphs. The Jubilee Line, originally planned as the Fleet Line, was a massive undertaking in the 1970s, boring through clay and gravel to connect the city. Now, these disused sections test new tube designs, ensuring safety and accessibility for future riders. And deeper yet is that 1845 artesian tunnel, a quiet conduit from a bygone era, its waters long replaced by mains supply, but its structure enduring in the darkness. Among the square's surface oddities are quirks that add to its sleepy charm. In the southeast corner stands what many call London's smallest police station, a hollowed-out lamppost with a door installed in 1926 after a temporary box from World War I proved useful. It allowed one officer to monitor crowds during protests or events, with a direct phone line to Scotland Yard. Though decommissioned in the 1970s and now used for storage, it remains a curious relic. Nearby, on the walls of Admiralty Arch, protrudes a mysterious nose, 7 feet up, part of artist Rick Buckley's 1997 protest against surveillance cameras. He placed 35 such noses around London. This one survives, inviting passers-by to rub it for luck, though urban legends claim it's a spare for Nelson's column or a mount for Napoleon's horse. The arch itself, built in 1912 as a memorial to Queen Victoria, frames the view down the Mall to Buckingham Palace. Wander to the north, and you'll find plaques embedded in the steps and walls, official imperial standards from 1876, marking feet, yards, chains, and perches set by the Board of Trade for public verification. Often overlooked amid the tourist shuffle, they hark back to a time when precise measurement was a sleepy, bureaucratic art. The lion's base bears scars too, cracked stones from the heat of 1918 armistice bonfires, where joyous crowds burned wooden blocks soaked in creosote, leaving permanent marks on the granite. And in the crypt of St. Martin in the Fields lies Henry Croft, the first Pearly King. Born in 1861 in a workhouse, he swept streets but decorated his suit with pearl buttons to raise charity funds, founding a tradition of pearly kings and queens across London's boroughs. His statue, moved here in 2002 after vandalism at his grave, stands quietly, adorned with medals from his lifelong giving. Other hidden gems include the LGBTQ+ pedestrian crossings installed in 2019 with heart-shaped symbols celebrating the square's role in Pride events. At Christmas, a nativity scene appears beneath the giant Norwegian spruce tree, gifted annually since 1947 in thanks for Britain's WWO's support, with eccentric figures in unusual poses. Street performers add life, levitating Yodas, chalk artists, and buskers, filling the air with soft melodies. The square has seen history unfold. Riots in the 1880s over unemployment, suffragette marches, anti-apartheid protests, and even Nazi plans during World War II to dismantle Nelson's column and ship it to Berlin if invasions succeeded. But it endured, a symbol of resilience. Beneath it all, rumors persist of a secret bunker under Nelson's column, perhaps from the Cold War, though unconfirmed, adding to the mystique. And in the underground arcade near the station, the world's oldest something. Or wait, perhaps it's the vibe of forgotten shops and sticky floors, leading to curios like Jean Cocteau's murals in the Church of Notre Dame de France, depicting biblical scenes with the artist's self-portrait. Nearby, a monument to Oscar Wilde invites conversation, his head emerging from a coffin-like bench. As our story winds down, picture Trafalgar Square at dusk, the fountains murmuring, the column standing tall against the fading light. Below, the tunnels hum with trains. Fossils sleep in the earth, and history rests quietly, waiting. Thank you for joining me on this sleepy exploration of London's hidden depths. If you enjoyed this, subscribe for more soothing tales. Like and share. Now let's dive into another story called The Black Death. Imagine yourself drifting back in time, dear listener, to a world long ago, where the winds whispered secrets through ancient streets, and the stars watched over sleeping villages. Close your eyes now, let the worries of today fade away like mist in the morning sun, and join me on a gentle journey through the shadows of history. This is the tale of the Black Death, a quiet storm that swept across the lands, changing everything in its soft, inexorable path. Relax, breathe deeply, and let the story unfold like a dream, carrying you along on its peaceful waves. In the year 1347, as autumn leaves turned golden and fell softly to the earth, a merchant ship sailed into the bustling port of Messina in Sicily. The ship had come from faraway lands, crossing vast seas under endless skies, carrying silks and spices, but also something unseen, something that hid in the folds of fate. The sailors on board were weary, their faces pale like moonlight, and as they docked, a strange hush fell over the harbor. Rats scampered down the ropes, tiny creatures with glossy fur, unaware of the burden they carried. Fleas, small and insistent, leaped from their backs, seeking new homes in the warmth of human lives. And so, without a sound, the plague began its quiet dance. The Black Death, as it came to be known, was a whisper of illness that grew into a sigh across Europe. It started in the east, in the vast steppes of Asia, where nomads roamed under wide blue heavens, and traders followed silk roads lined with caravans. There, in the 1330s, the disease stirred among rodents, passing from one to another in the gentle rhythm of nature. Bubonic plague, they called it later, caused by a tiny bacterium named Yersinia pestis. But in those days, it was simply a mystery, a shadow that fell upon the unwary. It traveled with the merchants, hitching rides on wagons and ships, moving westward like a slow river finding its way to the sea. As the ship in Messina unloaded its cargo, the first signs appeared. People began to feel a subtle ache, a fever that crept in like evening chill. Swellings grew in their groins and armpits, buboes they were called, dark and painful, like bruises from an unseen fall. The skin turned black in places, hence the name, the Black Death. Victims coughed, their breaths ragged and soft, and within days, many slipped away into eternal sleep. The townsfolk watched in quiet horror as the illness spread from house to house, neighbor to neighbor, carried on the backs of fleas that jumped innocently from rats to humans. From Sicily, the plague floated northward, touching the shores of Italy. In Genoa and Venice, grand cities of marble and canals where gondolas glided like dreams on water, the disease found fertile ground. Merchants, rich in gold and stories, brought it home from their voyages. The air filled with the scent of herbs and incense as people tried to ward off the invisible foe. Doctors in bird-like masks, with beaks stuffed with lavender and roses, wandered the streets, their footsteps echoing softly. They believed the plague came from miasma, bad air that poisoned the soul, and so they purified the spaces with fire and vinegar. But the shadow persisted, gentle yet unrelenting. By 1348, the Black Death had crossed the Alps, entering France like a traveler seeking rest. Paris, the city of lights even then, though dimmer in those medieval times, felt the weight of it. The Seine flowed calmly, reflecting the spires of Notre Dame, but inside the homes, families huddled in fear. Kings and queens, in their castles of stone, were not immune. The plague respected no crown. It took the young and old alike, leaving villages empty, fields untended. Crops swayed in the breeze, unharvested, as the workers lay still in their beds. The church bells tolled softly, day and night, a lullaby for the departed. England awaited across the Channel, an island of green hills and misty moors. In June out of that year, ships from Gascony brought the plague to Dorset, a quiet coastal town where fishermen mended nets by the sea. From there, it spread inland to Bristol and then London, where the Thames wound through crowded alleys. The streets, narrow and cobbled, echoed with the cries of the afflicted, but soon those cries faded to whispers. People turned to prayer, kneeling in cathedrals with stained glass windows that filtered sunlight into rainbows. Flagellants wandered the roads, whipping themselves in penance, their chants rising like smoke into the sky, hoping to appease a wrathful god. The symptoms were a slow unraveling. It began with a shiver, a chill that wrapped around the body like a cool blanket. Then came the fever, warm and insistent, drawing sweat from the brow. The buboes swelled, tender to the touch, filled with pus and pain. Some bled internally, their skin mottling with dark spots like ink spilled on parchment. In its pneumonic form, the plague attacked the lungs, turning coughs into bloody mists, spreading through the air from breath to breath. Septicemic plague was rarer, a swift darkness that poisoned the blood, leading to a quick, merciful end. But for most, it was days of lingering, a gradual drift into sleep from which there was no awakening. Society bent under the weight, like a tree in a gentle wind. 1/3 to 1/2 of Europe's people vanished, perhaps 25 million souls or more, though numbers blur in the haze of time. Villages became ghost towns, their thatched roofs sagging under rain. Farms lay fallow, weeds creeping over plowed earth. Prices soared for food and labor as survivors demanded more for their toil. The feudal system, with its lords and serfs bound to the land, began to crack. Peasants, now scarce, wandered freely, seeking better wages in distant manors. Revolts simmered like embers in a dying fire, leading to changes that would reshape the world. Medicine in those days was a blend of ancient wisdom and hopeful remedies. Physicians, trained in the texts of Galen and Hippocrates, balanced the humors: blood, phlegm, yellow bile, black bile, with bleedings and purges. They lanced the buboes, letting the foul liquid drain, sometimes saving lives in the process. Herbs like garlic and onions were chewed, their pungent scents believed to cleanse the air. Posies of flowers were carried, inspiring nursery rhymes that linger to this day. Ring around the rosy, a pocket full of posies, ashes, ashes, we all fall down. A child's game, born from sorrow, a lullaby for the lost. The church stood at the center, a beacon in the storm. Priests administered last rites, their voices soothing as they absolved sins. But many clergy fell too, leaving parishes without guidance. Some saw the plague as divine punishment for greed or heresy, urging repentance in sermons that echoed through empty pews. Others turned to mysticism, visions of saints and angels guiding them through the veil. Art changed, paintings filled with skeletons dancing with the living, a memento mori to remind all of life's fleeting nature. The dance of death, macabre yet beautiful, captured the equality of the grave, king and peasant hand in hand. As the plague waned in the 1350s, flickering out like a candle at dawn, Europe awoke to a new day. The population rebound was slow, generations passing before numbers swelled again. But innovation bloomed in the aftermath. The Renaissance stirred, a rebirth of art and learning, perhaps fueled by the shake-up of old orders. Labor shortages spurred inventions like better plows and mills, easing the burden on human backs. Trade routes, once carriers of death, now brought wealth anew, connecting continents in webs of commerce. Yet the Black Death was not gone forever. It lingered in pockets, resurfacing in waves through the centuries. In 1665, it visited London again, the Great Plague claiming thousands before the Great Fire cleansed the city. Each time, humanity adapted, learning slowly about hygiene and quarantine. Words like quarantine itself came from those days, from the 40 days ships waited offshore, a period of watchful waiting. Let us wander deeper into the personal stories, the quiet lives touched by this shadow. Picture a young girl in Florence named Caterina, with hair like spun gold and eyes full of wonder. She lived in a house by the Arno, where her father was a weaver, his loom clicking rhythmically like a heartbeat. When the plague came, it took her mother first, a gentle woman who sang lullabies at night. Caterina nursed her, wiping her brow with cool cloths, whispering prayers into the dim room. Then her siblings fell, one by one, their laughter silenced. Alone, she survived, marked by scars but resilient, like a flower blooming after frost. She married later, bore children, and told them tales of the time when death walked the streets, teaching them to cherish each dawn. Or consider Brother Elias, a monk in a monastery atop a hill in Provence. Surrounded by lavender fields that swayed in the breeze, he copied manuscripts by candlelight, his quill scratching softly on vellum. The plague arrived with a traveling pilgrim, feverish and frail. Elias tended to him, and soon the abbey echoed with coughs. He buried his brothers in the soft earth, planting rosemary over their graves for remembrance. In his solitude, he wrote chronicles, words flowing like a stream, preserving the memory for future eyes. His faith deepened, a quiet anchor in turbulent seas. In the countryside, farmers like old Thomas felt the change most keenly. His fields in Bavaria were golden with wheat, but with no hands to reap, the grains fell to the ground, feeding birds instead of men. He lost his wife and sons, and in his grief he turned to the soil, planting anew with trembling hands. The lords, desperate for workers, offered freedoms once denied: land to own, rights to move. Thomas became a yeoman, proud and independent, his descendants thriving in the new world born from ashes. The economic ripples spread wide like circles in a pond after a stone's gentle drop. With fewer mouths to feed, diets improved. More meat, better bread. Wages rose, allowing common folk to buy luxuries once reserved for nobles: fine cloths, spices from afar. Towns grew, drawing people from rural hamlets, fostering guilds and markets bustling with life. Universities flourished, minds hungry for knowledge, questioning old dogmas. The printing press would come later, but the seeds were sown in this fertile ground of upheaval. Culturally, the plague wove threads into literature and law. Boccaccio's Decameron, a collection of tales told by youths fleeing the sickness in Florence, captured the human spirit: love, wit, tragedy, all in the face of mortality. Chaucer's Canterbury Tales echoed similar themes: pilgrims sharing stories on roads shadowed by memory. Poetry flowed, lamenting the lost, celebrating survival. Music softened, ballads sung by firelight, melodies that lulled the weary to sleep. Science, too, stirred from its slumber. Though centuries would pass before Pasteur and Koch unveiled the microbial world, the plague prompted observations. Doctors noted patterns: the role of rats, the speed of spread in crowded places. Quarantines became standard, isolating the ill in lazarettos. Hospitals built on islands like Venice's Poveglia, where the sick waited in quiet exile. Trade ships flew yellow flags, signaling caution, a visual whisper of danger. Beyond Europe, the plague touched other lands. In the Middle East, it ravaged Cairo and Damascus, where minarets pierced the sky and markets hummed with voices. Ibn Khaldun, the great historian, lost family and wrote of the catastrophe, his words a bridge between worlds. In India and China, echoes of the disease lingered, shaping populations and paths. As we drift further, consider the ecological shifts. With human numbers thinned, forests regrew, reclaiming abandoned fields. Wildlife flourished, deer roaming freely, birds nesting in quiet ruins. The air cleared, rivers ran purer, nature reclaiming balance in its slow, healing way. Climate played a role too. The Little Ice Age cooled the lands, perhaps aiding the flea's survival, but also bringing hardships that compounded the woe. The psychological scars ran deep, a collective trauma etched into souls. Fear of contagion bred suspicion, leading to pogroms against outsiders. Jews falsely accused of poisoning wells, their communities shattered like fragile glass. Yet kindness emerged too, strangers aiding the stricken, heroes in humble guise. Confraternities formed, brotherhoods dedicated to burying the dead with dignity, their processions solemn and serene. In art, the theme of Vanitas prevailed, skulls and hourglasses reminding viewers of time's passage. Hieronymus Bosch painted surreal visions, gardens of earthly delights tinged with decay. The hour of death became a motif, skeletons grinning in frescoes, a gentle nudge to live well. As the centuries turned, the Black Death faded into legend, a story told by grandmothers to wide-eyed children. But its lessons endure: the fragility of life, the resilience of humanity, the interconnectedness of all. Vaccines and antibiotics now guard against such shadows, but vigilance remains, a quiet watch against unseen threats. And so, dear listener, as our tale winds down like a river meeting the sea, let the echoes of the Black Death lull you into peace. Remember the lives lived, the sorrows borne, the triumphs that followed. Drift now into sleep, wrapped in the soft blanket of history, knowing that even in darkness, light finds its way. Now, let's get into a story called Founding of Londinium. We're drifting back nearly 2,000 years to the misty shores of the Thames, where a small settlement rose from the earth, its name echoing through time, Londinium. This is the story of how London, a city that would one day command the world, began as a humble Roman outpost. So settle in, let the world fade, and let the soft currents of history carry you to the founding of Londinium. The year is 43 AD, and the Roman Empire, vast and unyielding, has turned its gaze to a wild island called Britannia. Emperor Claudius, driven by ambition, sends his legions across the sea, their armor glinting under a pale sun. Thousands of soldiers march through southeastern hills, their standards bearing the eagle of Rome. The native tribes, fierce and proud, resist where they can, but the Romans press forward, their discipline a force of nature. They carve paths through dense forests, seeking a place to plant their flag, to anchor their conquest in this untamed land. The Thames flows wide and sluggish, its dark waters reflecting the sky, winding through marshes and woodlands. Reeds fringe its banks, fish dart beneath its surface, and the air carries the scent of earth and water. The Romans, ever practical, see its potential. Deep enough for ships, wide enough to defend, and perfectly positioned far enough inland to be safe from coastal raids, yet close to the sea for trade. Here, they decide, will rise Londinium, a name that may whisper of the Celtic word for wild or flowing, though its origins are lost in the mists of time. Roman surveyors arrive first, their boots sinking into the soft, muddy ground. The air is cool, damp, heavy with the promise of rain. These are engineers, men trained to tame chaos with order, carrying measuring rods, picks, and shovels. They scout the northern bank of the Thames, where the ground slopes gently, its gravelly soil firm enough for building. With precise Roman efficiency, they mark out a grid, driving wooden stakes into the earth, stretching ropes to outline streets. The first lines of Londinium take shape, a patchwork of ambition on a wild canvas. The work begins slowly. The marshes are treacherous, the ground stubborn. Workers wade through ankle-deep mud, hauling timber from nearby forests. Axes ring out, felling ancient oaks, and logs are dragged to the riverbank. The Romans build a wooden jetty, a modest start for a port where boats can dock with supplies from the coast. Grain, wine, olive oil, and amphorae filled with Rome's comforts arrive on flat-bottomed vessels. Soldiers, hardened by campaigns but chilled by Britain's damp, grumble as they work, yet their hands never falter. They know this settlement is more than a camp. It's the seed of something greater, a foothold for Rome in this misty land. Wooden huts rise, their thatched roofs blending with the landscape. The Romans dig ditches to drain the marshes, lay gravel for roads, and erect a palisade to guard their outpost. Hammers and saws hum in the air, a steady rhythm that settles over the settlement. Soldiers sleep in tents or crude barracks, their fires casting flickering shadows on wooden walls. Local tribes, the Catuvelauni and others, watch from afar, some trading furs and grain, others whispering of resistance, their voices soft as the wind through the trees. The Thames is Londinium's lifeblood, and the Romans know it. They set to work on a bridge, a marvel to bind the settlement to the land. Timbers are driven deep into the riverbed, forming piles that rise above the water. Workers balance on rafts, guiding beams into place, their hands calloused, their faces etched with focus. Plank by plank, the bridge stretches across the Thames, linking north to south. To the locals, it's a wonder, a sign of Rome's power to reshape the earth. This bridge will become Londinium's heart, channeling trade, troops, and travelers, tying the settlement to the growing web of Roman roads. Months pass, and Londinium grows. Huts give way to warehouses, granaries, and a small forum, the civic pulse of any Roman town. Merchants arrive, drawn by profit. Stalls line the riverfront, voices calling in Latin, offering pottery, glassware, and cloth from across the empire. The scent of fresh bread mingles with salted fish and sharp wine. Londinium is no longer just a military post. It's a hub where Roman order meets Britannia's wild spirit. Soldiers, traders, craftsmen, and even a few local Britons swell its numbers, their lives intertwining in this fledgling settlement. The streets are narrow, gravel crunching underfoot. The air hums with the clink of coins, the creak of cartwheels, and the murmur of Latin and Celtic tongues. A blacksmith's forge sparks nearby, shaping iron into tools and weapons. A potter spins clay into delicate bowls, their surfaces painted with distant patterns. The river's gentle lapping is ever present, boats bobbing at the docks, their crews unloading crates as gulls wheel overhead, their cries soft and mournful. The Romans bring their gods to Londinium. Small shrines rise for Jupiter, Mars, and the river deities guarding the Thames. Offerings of wine and grain burn at these altars, their smoke curling into the sky. Soldiers, superstitious in this foreign land, pray for protection, their whispers mingling with the mist. The locals have their own sacred groves and springs, and a cautious respect grows, born of necessity, as Roman and Briton learn to share this space. Londinium's early years are not without hardship. The marshes flood, the winters bite, and supplies sometimes dwindle. The threat of rebellion simmers, a shadow of the Boudiccan revolt, to come in 60 or 61 AD, when flames will test Londinium's strength. But for now, the settlement is a place of hope, of possibility. The Romans, builders, and dreamers see in Londinium a chance to create something lasting, a city to outlive their empire. The sun sets over the Thames, painting the water gold. The bridge stands proud, its timbers weathered but strong. The streets quiet, the day's work done. Fires glow in hearths, pushing back the chill of the British night. Soldiers stand watch, cloaks drawn tight, while merchants count coins and dream of wealth. The river flows on, steady and eternal, carrying the hopes of this small settlement. Londinium is young, fragile, but rooted deep. Its story is just beginning, a tale that will grow through centuries, becoming the London we know. As the sounds fade, the hammers, the voices, the rivers lapping, let the scene soften like a dream dissolving into mist. Londinium sleeps, its people dreaming of a future unseen. The Thames carries the memory of those first stakes, those first dreams. You've walked the streets of a city in its infancy, a city destined to hold the world. Thank you for drifting through this tale. If it soothed you, let me know in the comments, and we'll wander another corner of history together. Now, we are diving into the mists of history, unraveling stories that shape the world we live in today. Before we begin, if you enjoy these deep dives into the past, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and ring the bell so you never miss a journey with us. Today, We're stepping into a time of faith, fervor, and conflict, a time when empires clashed and ordinary people were swept up in extraordinary events. Settle in, maybe grab a cozy blanket or a warm drink, because we're about to explore the Crusades, a series of religious wars that stretched across centuries, leaving echoes that still resonate today. Let's drift back to a world of knights, pilgrims, and distant lands, where devotion and ambition intertwined under the banner of the cross. Picture a bustling medieval city, maybe Jerusalem or Constantinople, around the late 11th century. The air is thick with the scent of spices, the clamor of markets, and the distant tolling of church bells. Religion isn't just a part of life, it's the heartbeat of it. For Christians in Europe, the Holy Land, the land where Jesus walked, is the ultimate sacred place. Jerusalem, with its ancient walls and holy sites, is a city that pulls at the soul. By the late 1000s, Jerusalem is no longer under Christian control. It's part of the Islamic world, governed by Muslim rulers. For centuries, Christians had been able to make pilgrimages to the Holy Land, visiting sacred sites like the Church of the Holy Sepulchre. But times are changing. The roads are growing more dangerous, and stories of pilgrims being harassed or worse are trickling back to Europe. These tales stir unease, but they're only part of a much bigger story. In Europe, the Christian world is fragmented but vibrant. The Catholic Church, led by the Pope in Rome, holds immense power, not just over souls, but over kings and emperors. It's a time of feudal lords, sprawling castles, and knights in shining armor. But it's also a time of tension. The Byzantine Empire, the eastern half of the old Roman Empire, is under pressure. The Seljuk Turks, a rising Muslim power, have been expanding, capturing lands, and threatening Constantinople itself. In 1071, at the Battle of Manzikert, the Byzantines suffer a crushing defeat against the Seljuks. The Byzantine Emperor, Alexios I, is desperate. He sends a plea to the West, to Pope Urban II, asking for help to defend his Christian empire. In a field in Clermont, France, in November 1095, a massive crowd gathers. Knights, peasants, clergy, all waiting to hear the Pope speak. Pope Urban II steps forward, his voice carrying over the sea of faces. He speaks of the Holy Land, of the dangers facing pilgrims, of the threat to Christendom. He calls for a holy war to reclaim Jerusalem. Deus vult, the crowd roars. God wills it. This is the spark that ignites the First Crusade, a movement that will draw thousands to take up the cross and march to a distant land. The First Crusade begins in 1096, and it's not just knights and soldiers who answer the call. Ordinary people, farmers, craftsmen, entire families, join what's called the People's Crusade. They're led by charismatic figures like Peter the Hermit, a preacher whose fiery sermons inspire devotion. These aren't trained warriors. They're pilgrims with little more than faith and determination. They trudge across Europe, their clothes tattered, their hearts full of hope. The journey is brutal. They face hunger, disease, and hostile lands. When they reach Asia Minor, the Seljuk Turks are waiting. The People's Crusade is no match for a disciplined army. In a tragic clash, most of these pilgrims are cut down or scattered. It's a grim prelude, but the real crusade is still to come. By 1097, the main force of the First Crusade sets out. Knights, nobles, and soldiers from across Europe. They're led by men like Bohemond of Taranto, a cunning Norman warrior, and Raymond IV of Toulouse, a devout nobleman. Their journey is long and grueling, crossing mountains and deserts, facing starvation and skirmishes. They capture cities like Nicaea and Antioch after brutal sieges, their banners fluttering in the dusty wind. At Antioch, the Crusaders, exhausted and outnumbered, hold out against a relentless enemy. At night, the stars above seem to whisper of divine purpose, and stories of miracles, like the discovery of the Holy Lance, said to have pierced Christ's side, bolster their resolve. In 1099, the Crusaders reach Jerusalem. The city's walls loom before them, a symbol of their dreams and their trials. The siege is fierce. Catapults hurl stones, ladders are raised against the walls, and the defenders fight with desperate courage. When the Crusaders break through, the city falls in a wave of bloodshed. The streets run red as they take control, their victory both triumphant and tragic. The Kingdom of Jerusalem is born, a Christian outpost in the Holy Land, ruled by Godfrey of Bouillon, who takes the humble title of Defender of the Holy Sepulchre. For the Crusaders, it's a moment of divine triumph, but for the region's inhabitants, it's a time of upheaval and loss. A few decades later, the Kingdom of Jerusalem clings to existence, surrounded by Muslim powers. The Crusaders build towering castles like Crac de Chevalier, their stone walls standing defiant against the sun. Holding the Holy Land is no easy task. The Muslim world, initially caught off guard, begins to unify. By the 1140s, the tide turns. The city of Edessa falls to Zengi, a powerful Muslim leader, sparking the Second Crusade. European kings like Louis VII of France and Conrad III of Germany lead the charge. But the Second Crusade is a shadow of the first. The armies falter, their campaigns plagued by poor planning and distrust. They fail to retake Edessa or achieve lasting victories, and the crusade fizzles out, leaving the Christian states in the Holy Land vulnerable. In the 1180s, a new figure emerges, Saladin, the Sultan of Egypt and Syria. He's a leader of immense skill, uniting Muslim forces with a vision of reclaiming Jerusalem. On horseback, his banners flutter as his armies gather. In 1187, at the Battle of Hattin, Saladin delivers a crushing blow to the Crusaders. The Christian army is shattered, and Jerusalem falls to Saladin's forces. The news reverberates across Europe, shaking the Christian world to its core. Pope Gregory VIII calls for the Third Crusade, often called the King's Crusade. The mightiest rulers of Europe answer. Richard the Lionheart of England, with his fiery courage, Philip the Sin of France, shrewd and calculating, and Frederick Barbarossa, the Holy Roman Emperor, a legend in his own right. Frederick's journey ends in tragedy when he drowns crossing a river. But Richard and Philip press on. The Third Crusade is a saga of epic battles and larger-than-life figures. Richard captures Acre after a grueling siege, his banners flying high. He and Saladin, two brilliant commanders, face off in a dance of strategy and honor. At the Battle of Arsuf, Richard's forces triumph, but Jerusalem remains out of reach. A truce is struck. Christians gain access to Jerusalem as pilgrims, but the city stays in Saladin's hands. Richard sails home, his legend growing, while Saladin's legacy as a unifier endures. The crusading spirit doesn't fade. The Fourth Crusade, launched in 1202, takes a dark turn. The Crusaders, unable to pay for their Venetian ships, are diverted to Constantinople, a Christian city. The golden domes of the Byzantine capital gleam under the sun. In 1204, the Crusaders sack Constantinople, looting its treasures and shattering the Byzantine Empire. It's a moment of betrayal, a crusade that turns against fellow Christians, leaving scars that linger for centuries. More crusades follow. The Fifth Crusade targets Egypt, hoping to weaken Muslim power at its core, but it ends in failure. The Sixth Crusade, led by Emperor Frederick II, is a curious chapter. Through diplomacy, rather than war, Frederick secures Jerusalem for a time, though his treaty is controversial. The Seventh and Eighth Crusades, led by Louis IX of France, a saintly king, aim for Egypt and Tunis, but achieve little. By the late 1200s, the Christian hold on the Holy Land slips. In 1291, the city of Acre, the last major Crusader stronghold, falls to the Mamluks. The dream of a Christian Holy Land fades, and the age of the major Crusades draws to a close. The Crusades leave ripples that touch every corner of the world. In Europe, they spark trade, bringing spices, silks, and ideas from the East. They strengthen the power of kings and the church, but they also sow division and distrust. In the Middle East, the memory of the Crusades lingers, shaping relationships between cultures and faiths. Knights' tales become legends, woven into tapestries and songs, while the scars of conflict remind us of the cost of zeal. As we return to the present, the human side of this story lingers. The Crusades were driven by faith. but they were also shaped by ambition, fear, and the clash of worlds. They brought people together, pilgrims, warriors, merchants, and tore them apart. A knight, his armor dented, gazes at the walls of Jerusalem, wondering if his journey was worth the cost. A merchant in Damascus watches crusader ships sail away, hoping for peace. These were real people, caught in a tide bigger than themselves. Thanks for joining me on this journey through the Crusades. If this story stirred your curiosity, give this video a thumbs up and share it with someone who loves history as much as you do. Drop a comment below. What part of the Crusades fascinates you most? And if you want more tales from the past, check out our other videos. Now, we are diving into the fascinating stories from history that shaped our world. We're stepping back into the 17th century to explore one of the most intimate and revealing windows into the past, the diaries of Samuel Pepys. If you've ever wondered what everyday life was like in Restoration England, complete with plagues, fires, scandals, and a whole lot of cheese, then buckle up, because this is going to be a wild ride. Samuel Pepys wasn't a king or a general. He was a hard-working bureaucrat with a pen and a passion for jotting down everything from his breakfast to his biggest secrets. His diary, spanning 9 years from 1660 to 1669, is like a time capsule that lets us eavesdrop on history. It's raw, honest, and sometimes downright hilarious. By the end of this video, you'll feel like you've time-traveled to London during one of its most turbulent eras. So grab a cup of tea, or maybe some ale, to stay in character, and let's get into it. First off, who was Samuel Pepys? Born on February 23, 1633, in London, Pepys came from humble beginnings. His father was a tailor and his mother a washerwoman. But young Samuel was sharp as a tack. He got a scholarship to St. Paul's School and then went on to Cambridge University, where he studied at Magdalen College. Life wasn't easy. He grew up during the English Civil War, a time when the country was tearing itself apart over politics and religion. King Charles III was executed in 1649, and Oliver Cromwell's Puritan regime took over. Pepys navigated this chaos carefully, keeping his head down and focusing on his education. By the 1650s, he was working as a clerk for Edward Montague, who would later become the Earl of Sandwich, a key figure in Pepys's rise to prominence. Pepys married young at just 22 to a 15-year-old French Huguenot girl named Elizabeth. Their marriage was passionate but stormy, filled with arguments, jealousy, and infidelities, mostly on his side, as we'll see. But it was in 1660, at the age of 27, that Pepys decided to start keeping a diary. Why? He never explicitly says, but historians think it was a mix of self-reflection, record-keeping, and maybe a bit of vanity. He wrote in shorthand, a coded system called Shelton's tachygraphy, which kept his thoughts private. And boy, did he have thoughts. Over the next 9 years, he filled 6 volumes with more than 1 million words, chronicling everything from the grand events of the day to the tiniest details of his personal life. Let's start with the big picture. 1660 was a turning point for England. The monarchy was restored when Charles II returned from exile, ending the Commonwealth era. Pepys was right there in the thick of it. On May 25th, 1660, he sailed with Montague to fetch the king from the Netherlands. In his diary, he describes the excitement, the ships decked out in flags, the crowds cheering, and Charles II himself, tall and charismatic, stepping aboard. Pepys writes about the king's easy manner, joking with the crew, and even petting the ship's dog. It was a moment of hope after years of austerity under the Puritans. London exploded in celebrations, bonfires, bells ringing, and fountains running with wine. Pepys, ever the observer, notes how he got roaring drunk that night, stumbling home in the wee hours. But life under the restored monarchy wasn't all parties. Pepys worked his way up in the Navy Board, becoming Clerk of the Acts. This job put him in charge of naval administration during a time when England was building its empire. He dealt with corrupt contractors, lazy sailors, and the constant threat of war with the Dutch. His diary is full of frustrations. Upbeat times, he often starts his entries, meaning early in the morning, rushing to meetings at Whitehall or the Admiralty. He'd haggle over timber prices, inspect ships at Deptford, and rub shoulders with the elite. Pepys was ambitious and clever. He invented new systems for tracking supplies, which helped him climb the ladder. But he wasn't above a little graft himself, accepting gifts from merchants, like a gold watch or a barrel of oysters. Now, what makes Pepys's diary so addictive is how he weaves the personal with the political. Take his home life. He and Elizabeth lived in a modest house in Seething Lane, near the Tower of London. Mornings might start with him practicing his viol, a string instrument he loved, or arguing with Elizabeth over household expenses. He was obsessed with money, always tallying his net worth, which grew from a few £100s to thousands as his career advanced. Food features prominently. Pepys was a foodie before the term existed. He describes feasts of venison pasties, roasted swan, and his famous hot pot of mutton. But he also notes simpler meals, bread and butter, or a mess of cream for dessert. And cheese, oh the cheese. In one entry during the Great Fire, he buries his parmesan in the garden to save it from the flames. Pepys was candid about his health too. He suffered from kidney stones, a painful condition that nearly killed him. In 1658, before the diary starts, he underwent a risky surgery to remove a stone the size of a tennis ball, without anesthesia, mind you. He survived and celebrated the anniversary every year with a stone feast. But the diary reveals ongoing pains, bladder issues, headaches, and eye problems that eventually forced him to stop writing. He tried all sorts of remedies, from herbal potions to wearing a hare's foot around his neck for luck. Then there's his love life, or should I say, his complicated romantic entanglements. Pepys adored Elizabeth, calling her my poor wife in tender moments, but he was a serial philanderer. The diary is peppered with his pursuits of maids, actresses, and friends' wives. He uses code words like "did what I would with her" to describe encounters, but it's clear what's going on. One ongoing saga is with his wife's companion, Deb Willett. Pepys hires her as a teenager, teaches her music, and soon develops a crush. Elizabeth catches them in a compromising position one day, leading to a massive row. Pepys swears off Deb, but can't resist sneaking around. It's messy, human, and utterly relatable, even if it's from 350 years ago. Shifting to the bigger events, let's talk about the Great Plague of 1665. This was one of the deadliest outbreaks in history, killing about 100,000 Londoners, a quarter of the population. Pepys stayed in the city while many fled, documenting the horror day by day. He describes empty streets, houses marked with red crosses, and the plea, "Lord, have mercy upon us," and the constant tolling of bells for the dead. Carts rumble by at night, collecting bodies with the cry, "Bring out your dead." Pepys tries to stay healthy. He chews tobacco as a preventive, avoids crowds, and notes the rising death tolls, from dozens to thousands per week. Yet life goes on. He still attends theatre, dines with friends, and worries about his Navy work. In one poignant entry, he sees a dead body in the street and reflects on mortality, but then heads off to buy a new periwig, a fashionable wig. The plague peaked in September 1665, with over 7,000 deaths in a single week. Pepys writes about the fear, rumors of infected dogs being killed, quack doctors selling useless cures, and the eerie silence of a locked-down city. His own household is touched, servants fall ill, and he sends Elizabeth to the countryside for safety. But Pepys presses on, even finding moments of joy, like playing music or enjoying a good book. His resilience is inspiring. He's scared but pragmatic. By late 1665, the plague begins to wane, and London starts to recover, though scarred. Barely a year later, disaster strikes again. The Great Fire of London, in September 1666. It started in a bakery on Pudding Lane and raged for 4 days, destroying 13,000 houses, 87 churches, and St. Paul's Cathedral. Pepys' diary gives us a front row seat. On September 2nd, he's woken at 3 a.m. by his maid, who spots the fire. At first, he dismisses it as distant, but soon realizes the danger. He rushes to the tower, climbs a turret for a better view, and sees flames engulfing the city. "It made me weep to see it," he writes, describing the river full of lighters and boats taking in goods. Pepys springs into action. He warns the king and Lord Mayor, who dithers at first. Charles II eventually orders houses pulled down to create fire breaks, a tactic that works, but too late for much of the city. Pepys evacuates his own home, burying valuables like wine, papers, and that precious Parmesan cheese in the garden. He and Elizabeth flee to a friend's house, watching the inferno from afar. The diary captures the chaos, people fleeing with their belongings, looters at work, and the sky glowing orange. By September 5th, the fire is out, leaving a smoldering ruin. Pepys walks through the ashes, his shoes burning from the heat, and notes the devastation. London was, but is no more. In the aftermath, Pepys helps with rebuilding efforts. Sir Christopher Wren redesigns the city with wider streets and brick buildings to prevent future fires. Pepys' Navy connections come in handy for supplying materials. But personally, he's shaken. The fire destroys his office, though his home survives. He reflects on the event as a divine judgment, yet sees opportunity in the renewal. Beyond these catastrophes, Pepys' diary shines a light on 17th century culture. He was a theatre buff, attending plays by Shakespeare and new works at the King's Theatre. He describes actresses like Nell Gwynn, who becomes Charles II's mistress, and the bawdy comedies that scandalized Puritans. Music was another passion. He composed songs, played the lute and flute, and hosted musical evenings. Science fascinated him too. He was elected to the Royal Society in 1665, rubbing elbows with Isaac Newton and Robert Hooke. His diary mentions experiments like dissecting a dog to study circulation or viewing the moon through a telescope. Pepys also comments on politics and society. He admires Charles II's wit, but criticizes his laziness and womanizing. The Second Anglo-Dutch War, 1665 to 1667, is a major thread. Pepys works tirelessly to equip the fleet, but corruption and poor leadership lead to humiliations, like the Dutch raiding the Medway River and burning English ships. Pepys testifies before Parliament, defending the Navy while exposing flaws. His honesty earns respect, but enemies too. As the years roll on, Pepys' life evolves. By 1667, he's wealthier, buying fine clothes, books, and even a coach. But his marriage strains under his infidelities. Elizabeth confronts him multiple times, once threatening him with hot tongs. They reconcile, but tensions simmer. Health issues mount. His eyesight deteriorates from long hours of candlelit writing. On May 31st, 1669, he pens his final entry. And so to bed, his signature sign-off, but with regret. He fears blindness and stops the diary, though he lives another 34 years. Rising to Secretary of the Admiralty and MP, Pepys died in 1703, childless, leaving his library, including the diaries, to Magdalen College. The volumes sat untouched for over a century until 1819, when a student deciphered the shorthand. The first edited edition came out in 1825, but it was heavily censored. Victorians blushed at the saucy bits. A full, unexpurgated version wasn't published until the 1970s. Today, the diary is hailed as a masterpiece of English literature, comparable to Boswell's Life of Johnson or Thoreau's Walden. Why does it endure? Because Pepys is so vividly human. He's vain, listing his fine outfits, greedy, coveting promotions, lustful, chasing skirts, but also kind, helping relatives, curious, exploring the world, and reflective, pondering faith and fate. His writing style is lively, short sentences, vivid details, like a modern blogger. He captures the flavor of the era, the smell of the Thames, the bustle of coffee houses, the thrill of scientific discovery. In a way, Pepys invented the personal memoir. Without him, we'd know far less about daily life in Restoration England, the fashions, foods, fears, and fun. His diary humanizes history, showing that people back then worried about the same things we do: work, love, health, and surviving crises. If you're hooked, check out the full diary online or in print. It's addictive reading. Have you read Pepys? What's your favorite entry? Drop it in the comments below. If you enjoyed this, like, subscribe, and hit the bell for more historical deep dives. Now, we are drifting into the misty, magical world of the Tower of London. This isn't just a castle. It's a place where centuries of secrets, whispers of ghosts, and the sparkle of royal jewels weave a story that feels like a dream. Let's wander slowly, softly through the ancient stones of this iconic fortress by the River Thames. Close your eyes, relax, and let the history unfold like a bedtime tale. Ready? Let's float into the past. Imagine a chilly morning in 1078, the air thick with mist off the Thames. William the Conqueror, fresh from his victory at Hastings, decides he needs a fortress to show London who's boss. So he builds the White Tower, the heart of what we now call the Tower of London. Its walls, made of creamy calm stone from across the sea, glow softly in the dawn light, standing 90 feet tall, with walls so thick, 15 feet in places, they feel like they could hold back time itself. It's not just a tower, it's a statement, a giant saying, "I'm here to stay." As you picture it rising above the medieval city, imagine the townsfolk gazing up, awestruck, maybe a little scared. Can you feel the weight of its presence? Over the years, the tower grew like a story, adding new chapters. Kings added walls, towers, a moat that shimmered with Thames water. Though, let's be honest, it was probably a bit smelly back then. The design borrowed from Roman forts and Crusader castles, with drawbridges creaking, portcullises clanking, and arrow slits ready for archers to defend the crown. Walking its grounds today, you'd feel the layers of history, like pages in an ancient book, each wall whispering tales of battles and betrayals. Let's drift deeper into those stories, shall we? In its early days, the tower was a palace, a home for kings and queens. Henry III, in the 1200s, made it fancy. Think lush tapestries, glowing stained glass windows, and a chapel that felt like a hug from heaven. He even started a menagerie, a royal zoo right here. Picture this: lions pacing, an elephant lumbering, and a polar bear, a gift from Norway in 1252, splashing in the Thames on a long leash, fishing for its supper. The bear's snowy fur glints in the sun, and the crowds gasp. For centuries, this zoo drew visitors until the animals moved to London Zoo in the 1800s. As you imagine, those roars echoing off the stones, let your mind linger on the wonder of it all. But the tower's story has a darker side, one that creeps in like a shadow. By the Tudor times, it became a prison. Not for common folk, but for nobles, royals, and rebels who dared defy the crown. Let's drift to 1536, to Anne Boleyn, Henry VIII's second wife. Accused of crimes like adultery and treason, she arrives by boat through Traitor's Gate, the water lapping gently as she steps into the tower's embrace. She stays in the Queen's house, praying in the quiet of St. Peter ad Vincula's chapel. On a soft May morning, she faces a French swordsman on Tower Green, her life slipping away in a single, swift stroke. They say her ghost lingers, wandering with her head tucked under her arm. Can you feel the chill of that tale settling over you? Henry VIII's reign fills the tower with drama. His daughter Elizabeth, before she was the great queen, was a prisoner here in 1554, sent by her sister Mary I. Picture her arriving in a rainstorm, her cloak soaked, stepping through Traitor's Gate. Here lands a loyal subject, she murmurs, defiant even in fear. She survives, but others don't. Sir Thomas More, Henry's chancellor, refuses to bend to the king's will and loses his head in 1535. His ghost, they say, drifts near the chapel, a quiet presence. The tower holds these stories close, like secrets whispered in the dark. Let's sink deeper into the shadows, to the dungeons. Beneath the stones, cells, damp and cold, wait for those who crossed the wrong line. The rack stretches bones, the scavenger's daughter crushes bodies, and manacles hang heavy on the walls. Torture wasn't common, but when it happened, oh, it was grim. Guy Fawkes, caught plotting to blow up Parliament in 1605, faced those dark rooms, his confessions spilling out under pain. If you visit now, you can see replicas of those tools, feel the echo of anguish in the air. Let's breathe slowly, letting that heaviness fade. But not all is grim. The tower sparkles too, with the crown jewels. In the jewel house, crowns and scepters gleam, guarded by the beef-eaters, those red-clad yeoman warders who share the tower's tales. Picture the imperial state crown, dripping with 2,800 diamonds, including the Koh-i-Noor, glowing like a star. The Cullinan watch, the largest cut diamond in the world, sits in the sovereign's scepter, catching the light. These treasures, worth billions, have been here since Charles II's time, hidden during wars, cherished through centuries. Imagine standing before them, their brilliance pulling you into a trance. And then there are the ravens. Oh, the ravens. 6 of them, always, because legend says if they leave, the kingdom falls. Charles II made sure they stayed, their wings clipped, their bellies full of raw meat and bloody biscuits. The Raven Master tends them, names them, Jubilee, Merlin, and they strut like tiny kings. One raven, George, got sacked for eating TV aerials. Picture them hopping along the paths, their black feathers gleaming, eyes sharp. Can you hear their soft caws in the evening hush? The ghosts, though, they're what make the tower feel alive at night. Anne Boleyn's spirit drifts through the green. The princes in the tower, young Edward and his brother Richard, vanished in 1483, may be murdered by their uncle Richard III, play in the bloody tower's shadows. Sir Walter Raleigh, imprisoned for years, appears headless on the battlements. Guards swear they've seen bears or heard spectral sentries challenge. Who goes there? If you take a twilight tour, the air feels thick, like the past is brushing your skin. Let that thought settle, soft and eerie. The tower's stones tell more than ghost stories. The White Tower's chapel, St. John's, with its rounded arches, feels like a prayer frozen in time. The Wakefield Tower, where Henry VI was murdered in 1471, holds a quiet sorrow. In the Beauchamp Tower, prisoners carved their names, their hopes into the walls. Poems, crests, cries for freedom. Picture running your fingers over those etchings, feeling the weight of their dreams. Through history, the tower stood firm. In 1381, during the Peasants' Revolt, rebels stormed in, dragging out the Archbishop of Canterbury to his death. In the Wars of the Roses, it passed between rival kings. Elizabeth began her coronation procession here in 1559, the cheers ringing out. During World War II, anti-aircraft guns hummed on its walls, and spies faced firing squads. Rudolf Hess, Hitler's deputy, slept here in 1941, a strange guest in a stranger time. Let's linger on some odd tales. In 1323, Roger Mortimer escaped, drugging guards, climbing ropes, swimming the moat, a daring dash under moonlight. In 1671, Colonel Thomas Blood tried to steal the crown jewels, flattening the crown, sawing the scepter, only to charm his way to a pardon from Charles II. The tower minted coins, stored gunpowder, sheltered royals during the Black Death. In 2014, its moat bloomed with 8246 ceramic poppies, each for a soldier lost in World War I, a sea of red under grey skies. Today, the tower welcomes millions, its beefeaters guiding you through history. The ceremony of the keys, locking the gates each night, has gone on for 700 years, even through bombs and blackouts. Tickets are about £30, and early mornings are quietest, letting you soak in the stillness. See Henry VIII's armor, massive from his later years, or the tiny suit for a child prince. The Fusilier Museum, the Line of Kings exhibit. They pull you into the past. In books and films, the tower lives on. Shakespeare's Richard III paints the prince's tragedy. Dickens wandered its halls. Movies like The Other Berlin Girl catch its drama. It's in songs, games, even Harry Potter's shadows. Picture its silhouette in the fog, a muse for storytellers. As we drift towards sleep, imagine walking the tower's walls at dusk. The ravens settle, the jewels dim, the ghosts watch silently. This fortress, palace, prison, treasury, it's a keeper of England's soul, its stories soft as whispers in the night. If you love this tale, like, subscribe, and tap that bell for more dreamy journeys. In the comments, share your favorite tower story, or if you felt its magic in person. For now, rest easy and let the tower's history cradle you to sleep. Good night.